The office pulsed with noise, laughter sharpened like knives, backroom whispers cloaked in flattery, and the endless drumbeat of polished voices vying for attention. In this cathedral of ambition, where ego was mistaken for excellence and visibility meant value, one man moved in silence. Elias. He didn't banter at the coffee machine. He didn't charm his way through performance reviews. He didn't even nod in meetings. He observed, noted, adjusted. His presence was unnerving not because it was loud, but because it wasn't he. Where others filled the air, Elias filled the gaps. No one remembered when he'd been hired, only that he'd been promoted. Rapidly. While colleagues climbed ladders rung by noisy rung, Elias appeared to glide upward. No fanfare, no celebration, just the quiet shifting of titles and responsibilities. His work was impeccable. His timing, surgical. And his strategy unknown. Then it happened. The CEO, a titan of presence known for his rants and rally cries, resigned without warning. No speech. No handover. Just a 3-line email sent at 5:03 a.m. By 9 a.m. chaos had erupted. Rumors spread like wildfire. Health scare. Boardroom coup. Hidden scandal. Yet through it all, Elias sat at his desk, calm as ever, typing with steady rhythm as if none of it surprised him. Because it hadn't. In the aftermath, someone discovered it. A single, overlooked post-it note stuck to the back of a filing cabinet in the executive suite. Faded ink. Written 6 months earlier. Voice always crumbles under weight. Prepare for the fall. The handwriting matched Elias's quiet. Slanted. Unmistakable. It wasn't just prediction. It was warning. Now, the whispers shifted. People began to look at Elias not as the quiet one but as the one who knew. And for the first time, silence felt louder than any voice in the room. Power, in this company, was like perfume. The stronger you wore it, the more you reeked of desperation. But Elias had no scent. No fingerprints. No trail. That's what made him dangerous. Weeks after the CEO's abrupt exit, the dust had barely settled when the next bomb dropped. A high-ranking executive was exposed for embezzling client funds. The numbers were staggering. The fall was immediate. Public. Humiliating. But what chilled the office wasn't the scandal itself, it was how seamlessly Elias sidestepped it. He had worked closely with the executive in question. Had signed off on project documents. Had been copied in every major email. And yet, when internal audits were unsealed, not a single questionable decision bore his name. Every interaction had been clean. Precise. Boring, even. Too boring. Whispers turned to murmurs. Murmurs turned to tension. Elias had always moved like a ghost, but now, people wondered if he was also haunting the halls. Engineering the falls. Watching them unfold with the same measured stillness he brought to everything else. And then came the real jolt. Amira, she wasn't just Elias's colleague, she was the closest thing he had to an ally. A rising star in operations with a reputation for blunt honesty and razor-sharp loyalty. She once defended Elias in a team meeting when others had tried to corner him about his closed-door habits. She called him unorthodox but surgical. Then she vanished. No goodbyes. No exit interview. Just an empty desk and a revoked ID badge. HR was vague. Personal leave. Family emergency. But no one bought it. Especially not when someone discovered that Amira's last calendar entry was a private 7 p.m. meeting. With Elias. Security footage showed her entering his office. It did not show her leaving. Later that week, a junior analyst found something strange in the shred bin outside Elias's door, scraps of Amira's handwriting, sliced into pieces but still legible. One phrase stood out. "You never said a word. But somehow, you told me everything." People started watching Elias differently after that. Not with curiosity but caution. Not because they understood him, but because they feared they never would. The silent climber had become something else entirely, the man whose shadow erased everyone else's. There was one thing the power players in the company couldn't tolerate more than failure, being ignored. Elias had mastered that art. He didn't just stay silent, he withheld acknowledgement. In meetings, while others vied for the spotlight, Elias would fix his gaze on the margins, as if seeing something no one else could. He never interrupted. He never argued. He simply let his stillness suggest that everything they were saying didn't matter. To most, it was maddening. But to Damien, it was unforgivable. Damien was charisma incarnate, bold suits, louder voice. His strength wasn't strategy, but spectacle. He built his reputation on grand speeches and viral company videos. People liked him. More importantly, he liked being liked. And Elias never clapped. Never smiled. Never even blinked in his direction. One morning, during a company-wide meeting, Damien snapped. In front of hundreds, he turned directly to Elias and sneered, "You know what I think? I think silence is just cowardice dressed in mystery. You hide behind it like a child hiding behind a curtain, hoping no one notices the trembling." The room held its breath. Elias didn't flinch. He didn't even look up. No response. Not a word. That might be been the end of it, a minor humiliation, another notch in Damien's belt, until 3 days later, everything changed. A rumor began to surface. Not about Elias but Damien. Something personal. Damaging. A betrayal from his past, involving a now terminated employee and an offshore account. It had nothing to do with current business, but it felt dirty. And it spread like rot. Within days, clients began canceling meetings. PR issued a quiet statement. Damien went dark. Then came the bombshell. During a closed-door HR inquiry, Damien himself confessed. "It's true," he said. "But I told Elias about this in confidence, years ago. He's the only one who knew." The room froze. One investigator asked, "Are you accusing him of leaking it?" Damien paused. His mouth opened, but no words came. He looked lost, defeated. "No," he said finally, "he didn't leak it. He just let it happen." Later, employees would try to make sense of the timeline. No proof linked Elias to the leak. No trace of him contacting anyone. But a pattern had started to form, one that couldn't be denied. Elias never raised his voice. But somehow, the loudest men always fell hardest after speaking his name. To understand Elias, you had to trace his silence back to where it was born, not in confidence, but in collapse. Years ago, before the company, before the climb, before the silence became myth, Elias was just another bright voice in a loud room. Ambitious. Eager. Naive enough to believe that truth, if spoken clearly, could change things. He was wrong. It happened during his first major role, a mid-level strategist at a consulting firm known for its toxic culture wrapped in glossy language. Elias had noticed a series of glaring inconsistencies in a senior partner's report. Numbers didn't add up. Projections were fake. He gathered the data, prepared a brief, and walked into a leadership meeting believing he was doing the right thing. He presented his findings clearly, calmly, passionately. And then, the laughter began. It wasn't just rejection, it was demolition. The senior partner made a mockery of Elias's concerns. One colleague clapped sarcastically. Another mimicked his tone. Someone joked, "Next time, bring crayons." No one defended him. After the meeting, the partner pulled Elias aside and said, "You don't speak truth to power. You feed it what it wants to hear or you disappear." He disappeared. But not in the way they meant. From that day forward, Elias stopped offering. He started watching. He traded language for leverage, voice for vision, emotion for pattern recognition. He became a mirror, reflecting others until they couldn't tell if they were looking at a man or a strategy. And he recorded all of it. Hidden inside his minimalistic apartment was a small drawer locked with a biometric scanner. Inside was a single flash drive. On it, a video file labeled "Only the Collapse." It was the full recording of that meeting. The moment his voice was killed. He didn't watch it for vengeance. He watched it for clarity before every major move, every shift in power, every manipulation. To remember. To remind himself what speaking had cost him. And what listening had given him. People called him cold. Calculating. But they never saw the ritual. The tremor in his hand as he pressed play. The flicker of pain that still lived behind the mask. The boy who once believed in words, still buried beneath layers of silence. The tragedy wasn't that Elias stopped speaking. The tragedy was that silence had made him undeniable. They didn't announce her arrival with a press release. She simply appeared as if summoned by the universe to test whatever force Elias had become. Her name was Freya Calder. A new executive. Brought in under the guise of strategic realignment. No one knew much, only that her resume was both immaculate and incomplete, time gaps where brilliance should have been. Institutions, awards, positions, but always just enough detail to make questions dangerous. She dressed simply. Spoke softly. But her presence had weight. Not loud like Damien's, not forceful like the old CEO's. It was still. Like Elias's too still. On her first day, she walked past Elias without a word. Their eyes met. No handshake. No nod. Just recognition. Predator meeting predator. To the rest of the office, Freya was charming. Empathetic. Quick to compliment. She'd listen so intently you'd feel like the only person in the room until you realized you remembered nothing she actually said. But Elias noticed the cracks. In the second-floor conference room, she removed the wall clock. "Noise," she said, when asked. In a strategy meeting, she redlined a colleague's plan, then apologized with a smile so warm it felt like praise. And every time Elias made a silent move, delaying a contract, shifting project roles, reallocating budget lines by fractions, Freya would respond with an equally silent adjustment. As if she knew. The office began to buzz. Were they allies, opposites, lovers, enemies? Elias remained unreadable. But beneath the surface, he felt something he hadn't in years, not fear, but friction. One evening, long after most had left, Elias returned to his office. The lights were off. His desk looked untouched except for a single item resting in the center. A crimson envelope. No name. Just his own handwriting on the front. He opened it. Inside was a photocopy of a page from his personal notebook, The Will to Outsmart. A passage he had written in private, years ago: the most powerful trap is one that mirrors your own design. No signature. Just silence. He looked toward the window. The reflection of his face in the glass was distorted, and behind it, faint and fading, was a silhouette moving away down the hallway. Freya. She hadn't just entered the game. She had already made the first move. The office had never felt colder. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the invisible war being waged in every glance, every pause, every carefully measured step. Two silent predators circled each other, Elias and Freya, each moving with calculated precision, each weaponizing silence into a battleground. No words were exchanged between them, yet their presence screamed louder than any shouting match. Meetings that once hummed with debate now crackled with tension. Promises made one day were quietly unraveled the next. Projects approved were quietly sabotaged in subtle ways. Budgets shifted, deadlines nudged, key players reassigned without explanation. The staff felt it like static in the air, a silent storm brewing, but no one dared speak its name. Freya's smile was an enigma, warm in public, chilling in private. She congratulated rising stars with a nod, but withheld approval from those who showed too much ambition, leaving them adrift. Elias, for his part, responded with an unyielding calm, a fortress of silence that no question or accusation could breach. Behind closed doors, the battle took a darker turn. A whistleblower report circulated anonymously within Human Resources, claiming both Elias and Freya were covertly collaborating to dismantle the company from within. The allegations named shadowy financial manipulations, deliberate project delays, and psychological tactics designed to fracture teams and erode trust. But there was no proof. Just a web of insinuations and half-truths. The company's leaders faced a nightmare: two of their most powerful executives locked in a deadly silent duel, while the rest of the organization stood on a razor's edge waiting for the quiet to explode. Meanwhile, Elias studied the report quietly. No denial. No confirmation. Just a calm acceptance of the chaos swirling around him. He understood one truth clearly: the war had changed. It was no longer about control. It was about survival. And in the game of silence, even the smallest sound could be a gunshot. For years, Elias had been the silent architect of control, weaving unseen webs that kept everyone in place, especially himself. But now, the reflection in that web was cracking. He sensed it first in the subtle shifts, the way Freya anticipated his moves before he made them, like a shadow preempting the flicker of light. Budgets he thought securely locked were quietly redirected. Emails vanished. Allies quietly withdrawn. Every piece he nudged into position slid out from under him. The rules he had mastered, silence as power, invisibility as weapon, were no longer his. Freya was no novice. She was a scholar of his methods, a student of Nietzsche's coldest maxims, but with a venom all her own. One late night, in the empty husk of the office, Elias confronted her. They stood face to face in the dim glow of a single desk lamp. His voice, rare and deliberate, broke the silence. "How long have you been watching me?" Freya's smile was slow, measured. "Longer than you think." She stepped closer, eyes gleaming with quiet fire. "I didn't come here to win." Elias's brow furrowed. "Then what?" "To break you." Her words hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. For the first time, Elias felt the raw edge of vulnerability, not just in his carefully curated empire, but inside himself. Because in the reflection Freya held up, he saw not the master of silence but a man trapped by his own code. The war was no longer about outsmarting others. It was about whether he could outlast himself. Silence had been Elias's armor for so long that speaking felt like tearing open a wound he'd barely healed, but now, the stakes had shifted and so had the rules. He couldn't remain mute any longer. The board was fracturing. The company's future was slipping through his fingers like smoke. Freya's silent siege was relentless, and she controlled the narrative without uttering a word. So Elias made a decision: he would speak. Just once. A private conversation, a carefully orchestrated encounter meant to unravel Freya's strategy, expose her motives, and reclaim his power. The day arrived. Elias prepared every detail. The room was soundproofed. The recording devices were hidden. His voice, usually so measured and rare, was rehearsed to perfection. He waited. And waited. Freya never showed. Minutes turned to hours. The silence in the room grew heavy, suffocating. Then the bombshell dropped. The very conversation Elias had prepared to dismantle Freya was leaked publicly. His voice, once a rarity, now echoed everywhere. Emails flooded inboxes. Social media buzzed. The board questioned his stability. Rumors spiraled out of control. And Freya, she watched from the shadows, unscathed, victorious. She had never intended to face him directly. Instead, she weaponized his own words against him. The silent strategist was exposed not by his own fault, but by the one person who knew how to break him. Elias's silence was shattered. But in breaking it, he'd lost more than he knew. The company was in ruins. Board meetings dissolved into chaos. Clients hesitated. The once steady rhythm of business had become an erratic pulse, a desperate scramble to grasp meaning in a whirlwind of silence and noise. Elias retreated. Into seclusion. Into shadows. Into the sanctuary of his own mind and the pages of the will to outsmart. There, beneath the cold glow of a single desk lamp, he found Nietzsche's ultimate truth inscribed in his own handwriting, a reminder scrawled in ink: he who wields silence must also master noise or be ruled by it. The paradox cut deep. For years, Elias had believed silence was power. The absence of words a weapon sharper than any blade. But now, noise had become a tidal wave crashing down, and his silence was no longer control. It was vulnerability. Outside, the company's directors convened for an emergency vote. Freya, the architect of the upheaval, was elected interim CEO, a decision met with cautious optimism and veiled dread. But in a move that stunned everyone, she resigned minutes later. In the hushed room, Freya's voice rang clear as she named her successor, Elias. Her words echoed with a cruel clarity: "Now, you must speak or be devoured." Elias understood the weight of the throne offered to him, a throne forged not in silence, but in the roar of expectations. The game had changed. The strategist who never spoke now faced the ultimate challenge: to wield noise as deftly as he had wielded silence. Or to fall. The auditorium was packed. Every eye fixed on the stage. Every breath held. Elias, the man who had ruled through silence, was finally set to speak. The room hummed with anticipation. Reporters poised, cameras rolling, executives perched on the edge of their seats. The world expected a speech that would explain, justify, maybe even redeem. But Elias did something no one anticipated. He stepped up, alone and composed, holding a single sheet of paper. Without a word, he lifted the page completely blank and held it high for all to see. A silence heavier than any before filled the room. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He simply turned and walked off the stage. The screens flickered. Lights dimmed. Then, from every device, phones, monitors, billboards. Freya's voice filled the air. Silence was never your weapon, Elias. It was your cage. I just opened the door. Gasps echoed. Cameras swung toward the empty stage. The room was shattered. Elias had built his empire on silence, but Freya's final move revealed the truth behind the myth. Silence wasn't freedom. It was confinement. And now, the cage was open. As the crowd reeled, one thing was clear: in Nietzsche's world, the quietest moves are often the deadliest.